Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're looking at the ultra rares found within Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links for the new pack called Darkness Gimmick. Number 15 Gimmick Puppet Giant Grinder is a dark attribute machine type Xyz monster. It's rank 8 with 1500 attack and 2500 defense. It requires 2 level 8 monsters to summon it, and its effect, up to twice per turn during your main phase 1, you can detach one material from this card, then target one special summoned monster your opponent controls, destroy it, then if it was an Xyz monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack. This is intended to be a bit of a counter towards other Xyz monsters, especially against some of the other number monsters, considering that those will be special summoned since they come from the extra deck. But this also works against any of your opponent's special summon monsters, be it Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon or anything of that era as well, or even things like Blue Eyes White Dragon that are still seeing competitive play and consistent play within the Duel Links meta. I would say the bonus effect of it targeting an Xyz monster means you can do an additional amount of life point damage to your opponents. Bear in mind it is only their original attack points, so if they've had any increases in the stats alongside things like Power of the Guardian, then those won't be applied. Also keep note that certain cards that protect others still exist within the game, and therefore this effect might be more easily able to be negated or supplemented than would be maybe when Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links first arrived. Starlight Dynamo is a light attribute warrior type Xyz monster. It's rank 4 with 2000 attack and 1000 defense. It requires 2 level 4 light attribute monsters to summon it, and once per turn you can detach 2 Xyz materials from this card, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls, change its attack to 0, and if you do, it has its effects negated. If this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card by battle or card effect and sent to your graveyard, draw one card. This essentially lets you zero out one of your opponent's monsters. It's very useful depending on what they're using, as well as being able to shut down their effects, which means you can use this as almost like a direct attack on your opponent's life points. Even if your opponent happens to get rid of this card, you're able to then draw an additional card, which means you're not losing anything from its summon. It's also very splashable within many types of decks, considering all it needs are 2 level 4 light attribute monsters. There are so many archetypes within the game that work alongside this, even if you think of things like Cyber Dragon. You also have examples such as Lightsworn, which can be a bit more competitive. Number 9 Dyson Sphere is a light attribute machine type Xyz monster, rank 9 with 2800 attack and 3000 defense. It requires 2 level 9 monsters to summon it, and the effect, once per battle step during your opponent's turn, if this card with Xyz material is attacked, negate the attack. This is a quick effect. When this card is targeted for an attack while it has no Xyz materials, you can target 2 monsters in your graveyard, attach those targets to this card as Xyz materials. During your main phase 1, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card. This card can attack your opponent directly this turn. Your opponent must control a monster with higher attack than this card for you to activate and to resolve this effect. Personally for me, this is one of the more powerful numbers. It's definitely one of the more favourite ones that I have. It has the ability to shut down your opponent's attacks on it. It can also recover its Xyz materials, which a lot of numbers can't do, or Xyz monsters in general cannot do, and it's not completely dependent on its Xyz materials to use its effects. The shutdown ability and the recovery of those Xyz materials are independent. They don't rely on you having Xyz materials on the card to begin with. The bonus effect is actually really nice because this lets you attack directly with a 2800 monster. Most cards that let you do something like this have very specific restrictions to them, in which normally their attack points have to be halved, or you cannot attack with other monsters for the duration of that turn. This simply means that your opponent has to have a higher attack monster for you to be able to do this. Depending on what your opponent is running, that might be fine, and actually if you can get this card out, you're able to clear the game within that turn. My only concern is that it requires 2 level 9 monsters, and there aren't too many of those currently in the game that are usable and splashable within multiple decks. Elemental Hero Grand Neos is an Earth attribute warrior type fusion monster, level 7 with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. It requires an Elemental Hero Neos and 1 Neospatian Grand Mole. It must first be special summoned from your extra deck by shuffling the above cards you control into the deck. You do not use polymerization. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, return that target to the hand. During the end phase, shuffle this card into the extra deck. I have seen a couple of people playing this, and the Jane Yuki deck specialising in the elemental heroes and the Neospatians has made a bit of a comeback. Previously it was very popular and then it kind of went away, but I think this is one of the more powerful elemental heroes in terms of the fusions that you have. The ability to return monsters from the field to the hand or even to the extra deck if it's an extra deck monster is massive. If your opponent has invested lots of resources into summoning those monsters, it's going to be more difficult for those monsters to then be turboed out, especially if they don't have many resources left. I don't really see that many downsides to this effect, the only one being that if they happen to get rid of your Neo space, or a card that treats itself as Neo space, for example, I think there's an equip card which treats itself like that, then this card has to return to the extra deck, much like most of the other elemental heroes. Gimmick Puppet Terror Baby is a dark attribute machine type level 4 with 500 attack and 0 defense. The effect: when this card is normal summoned, you can target one Gimmick Puppet monster in your graveyard, except Gimmick Puppet Terror Baby. Special summon it in defense position. You can banish this card from your graveyard. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of your Gimmick Puppet monster effects this turn. I love the design of this card, and it's actually one of the newer supports for the Gimmick Puppet archetype. It has the ability to special summon a monster from the graveyard, which means if you go into another one of your level 4s, you can actually go into their new rank 4 Xyz monster, or you could always go into one of their level 8s, and then some of them, like Magnetic Doll, let you special summon itself onto the field, and since it's a level 8, it will help to encourage the summoning of number 40, Puppet of Strings. The secondary part of the effect actually is also very decent. It lets your Gimmick Puppets do whatever they want in terms of their effects, without those being shut down for the turn. It's very useful for Puppet of Strings and for Giant Grinder, but you'll see it as soon as it comes out as Disaster Leo and Puppet of Leo as well, because they can use their effects, get the Destiny counters on them, and be able to actually win you the game. The only downsides of those cards are they don't actually provide their own protection. Vampire Duke is a dark attribute zombie type level 5 with 2000 attack and 0 defense. Its effect is: when this card is normal summoned, you can target one dark attribute vampire monster in your graveyard, special summon that target in face up defense position. When this card is special summoned, you can declare one card type, monster, spell or trap. Your opponent sends one card of that type from their deck to the graveyard. You can only use this effect of Vampire Duke once per turn. This card cannot be used as an Xyz material or an Xyz summon except for the Xyz summon of a dark attribute monster. The vampire archetype actually has their own Xyz monster, which is a rank 5. It's called Bram, and this card just basically lets you turbo that out. You can revive things such as Vampire Lord, and there are other examples as well which are found within this pack, and then instantly go into that rank 5 monster. The ability to make your opponent discard a card from their deck is the same with a lot of the vampire cards, so it's just running along the same theme. The restriction on it isn't that bad because it's just limiting you to summoning dark attribute monsters. It's not limiting you to simply running vampire archetype extra deck monsters. Insecto Dragonfly is a dark attribute insect type level 3 with 1000 attack and 1800 defense, and its effect is: once per turn you can equip one Insecto monster from your hand or graveyard to this card. If an equipped card is sent to your graveyard while equipped to this card, except during a damage step, you can special summon one Insecto monster from your deck, except Insecto Dragonfly. While this card is equipped to a monster, that monster's level is increased by 3. The whole aspect of the Insecto monsters are they're able to pitch each other and then use multiple different types of effects to either search for other monsters, or to special summon, or to add to the hand. And by adjusting levels, you're then able to go into their Xyz monsters, which of course you have, for example, a rank 6 in the form of Excalibur. Smashing Ground is a normal spell card with the effect: destroy the face-up monster your opponent controls that has the highest defense, your choice if tied. This is good against mostly defensive style decks because they'll have high defensive monsters, or decks that somehow run high defense in part of their archetype. Notable examples include the Gravekeepers. I mean, you've got Gravekeeper's Spy, Gravekeeper's Guard. You probably have lots of other examples. Destiny Hero Defender is another example. Subterrors. They work very well at destroying those types of monsters, and actually, unlike something like Hammer Shot, which destroys the highest monster in attack on the field, which could actually involve your own monster, this is forcing your opponent to get rid of one of theirs. And even though it's the highest, that's really what you want to be getting rid of. I would say the one downside, it does have to be face-up defense mode. That means you're going to have to flip that monster up first, and since you don't have a main phase 2, you're going to have to wait until your following turn before you can actually get this effect off, which makes it quite a massive weakness in comparison to when it was originally introduced in the game. And the final ultra rare is Jelly Cannon. This is a normal trap card with the effect, when a monster declares an attack, target one monster on the field, shuffle it into the deck. I love the design of this card. You can think of it as a small version of Drowning Mirror Force, but it only happens to get rid of one monster rather than multiple within the turn. There are some benefits to it over Drowning Mirror Force. For example, Drowning Mirror Force requires you to only return monsters if your opponent has gone into a direct attack. That means you have to have no monsters on your field, which means you have to put yourself at quite a high risk situation if you're setting that type of card. And of course, your opponent, be it a battle-based trap, means that your opponent can just use Mystical Space Typhoon, Cosmic Cyclone, Dice-Foon, or some other examples that can get rid of the card before you actually are able to trigger off the effect. I'd also argue with Jelly Cannon, it does require to be activated during the battle phase anyway, but it's during yours or your opponent's. It's just when a monster declares an attack. It doesn't have to be yours, it doesn't have to be an opponent's. It's just when something attacks. And it doesn't have to specifically target the monster that's attacking. You can send back anything your opponent controls, which means you can actually get rid of some of the high resource monsters, such as extra deck ones, which you might have more difficulty with have you been running certain styles of decks. So what do you guys think of these cards? I do love them. I think actually they're really useful, and I'm glad that we're seeing a lot more of the numbers introduced within the game. My favourite, of course, is number 9, Dyson Sphere, but I also enjoy number 15 as well. And I'm glad that we're starting to see implementations of some of the other characters, especially some of the main villains, almost like boss monsters. The one I'm really waiting for is number 92, Heart Earth Dragon, but I don't reckon we're going to get that for a while. We've only just been introduced to Quattro. We're still only starting to see parts of Trey's deck. We also have the cards for Quentin. We've got a few of their machine type monsters such as Planet Pathfinder. We've got number 9 Dyson Sphere, Tannhauser Gate, all cards that he used, but we're yet to see some of the Chaos numbers, which I'm also looking forward to. So what do you guys think of these cards? Is there anything you particularly like? Is there anything you dislike within the ultra rares? Leave those comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.